I was 2 weeks from closing on my first house. 9 years of double shifts, frozen dinners, and a savings account. I checked every morning before I checked anything else. Found out my sister sold our parents' house, pay off her gambling debt, and forged my name to do it. I drove 4 hours to Dayton. The house was empty. New locks. New owner had a contractor van sitting in the driveway like he already owned the place. Which, on paper, he did. I called Lauren from the curb. She said she was desperate. Said the casino guys threatened to break her legs. I said, "You used my signature, Lauren." She didn't say anything. That was her answer. But here's the thing. When I finally got a copy of that deed, the signature wasn't mine. It was close. Real close. But it wasn't mine, which means she didn't just betray me. She committed a felony. And the guy she sold it to? He's already trying to push out the tenants who've lived there for 12 years. An older couple. The husband's on dialysis. So now I've got a choice. Press charges against my little sister and watch her go to prison. Or lose everything I've been working toward since I was 27 years old. Keep watching. Because what I did next, she never saw it coming. Let me tell you who I am before any of this makes sense. My name is Cole Harmon. I'm 36 years old. I'm a building inspector for the city of Cincinnati. My job is to walk through structures, houses, commercial buildings, new construction, and find what's wrong with them before somebody gets hurt. I've been doing it for 11 years. I'm good at it because I don't miss things. Not because I'm some kind of genius. Because I was taught to look. My dad, Bill Harmon, worked maintenance at a GM plant in Dayton for 22 years. He could walk into any room in any building and tell you in 60 seconds what was holding it up and what was about to give. He passed that on to me the same way he passed on everything, not by talking about it, but by just doing it in front of me until I understood. We were not a family with a lot of money, but we were a family with a lot of standards. You paid your bills on time. You fixed what broke instead of replacing it. You didn't complain about what you didn't have. You figured out how to get it. That's just how it was. I started saving for a house when I was 27, opened a separate account, and moved money into it every paycheck without fail. 9 years. I didn't take vacations. I drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it until the wheels were practically falling off. I brought lunch from home every single day, like a guy in a cartoon. The house I was about to close on was a 3-bedroom in Westwood, solid neighborhood. Good bones, needed some work that I was more than capable of doing myself. It was mine, or it was supposed to be, 14 days from the closing table. And then Lauren called. Said she needed me not to freak out. In my experience, when somebody leads with that, freaking out is exactly the appropriate response. Lauren is my younger sister by 6 years. She's always been the one people liked immediately, the one who remembered your name, who showed up when you needed help without being asked, who could make a room full of strangers feel like old friends in 20 minutes. She got that from my mom. I got the hard hat and the clipboard. I didn't know she had a gambling problem. Not until that Tuesday. Not until those 6 words. 4 years she'd been carrying it. 4 years, I don't say that to make you feel bad for her. I say it because you need to understand what we're dealing with. This wasn't a stranger. This was my sister, and what she did still happened. 114 Birchwood Avenue. My parents bought that house in 1991. My dad put a small inheritance from his uncle toward the down payment, every dollar of it. My mom told me years later that when they got the key, she stood in the empty living room and just looked around for a while without saying anything. That was about as emotional as Diane Harmon got in public. Dad built the back deck in the summer of '94. Took him 3 weekends. He let me hand him tools when I was 8 and thought I was helping. The deck is still there, level as the day he built it. Mom planted hostas along the front walk every spring. The kitchen had yellow wallpaper with roosters on it that everybody in the family complained about for 30 years and nobody ever changed. There was a detached garage out back full of tools my dad organized so carefully that you could find anything in 30 seconds. I know every inch of that house. I inspected buildings for a living, and I still knew that house better than any structure I'd ever walked through professionally, because I grew up inside its walls. The house had an upper unit where my parents lived, and a downstairs unit with its own side entrance. They rented it out from the time I was in middle school. The income helped with the mortgage. Frank and Ruthie Kowalski moved in downstairs in 2012. Frank was a retired machinist. Ruthie had worked school cafeteria for 20 years. They were quiet, reliable, kept the place up shoveled without being asked. My mom loved Ruthie. They used to sit on the porch together on Saturday mornings with their coffee. Frank was diagnosed with stage 3 kidney disease 2 years ago. He does dialysis 3 times a week at a center 8 minutes from Birchwood. Ruthie stopped working to take care of him. They were not going anywhere, and they couldn't afford to. My dad died in February of 2021. Heart attack while shoveling the driveway. 63 years old. By the time the ambulance got there, it was done. My mom lasted 14 months after him. Congestive heart failure on the death certificate. The truth is, she was finished when he was. Anybody who knew them knew that they didn't have a will. Dad kept saying he'd get around to it. He was the kind of man who thought that kind of paperwork was admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. Under Ohio law, Lauren and I were equal heirs. The house passed to both of us. We kept splitting the rent from downstairs. We kept meaning to sit down with an attorney and get the estate sorted out. We never did. You put off the hard stuff when the hard stuff is also the sad stuff. That delay is partly on me. I know that. I'm a building inspector. I know better than most people what happens when you leave the structural work undone, but I didn't think Lauren would sell the house out from under me while I wasn't looking. So that's on her. I want to be straight with you about my sister before this goes any further. Lauren is not evil. I know that's a weird thing to say about someone who forged your name on a real estate deed, but it's true and it matters. Lauren is the kind of person who remembers every single person's birthday and shows up with a real card, handwritten. When my dad was sick, she drove to Dayton 3 times a week to sit with him. She learned how to manage his medications. She held his hand through things I couldn't be there for because I was working. I never asked her to do any of that. She just did it. The gambling started around 2019. Poker nights at a coworker's place. Then online games. Then drives out to the casinos. She's always been competitive, always needed to be in the middle of something with stakes attached. For a while, the winning made her feel like herself. Then the losing started, and she chased it. She borrowed from her credit cards, then from a guy at work, then from a man she met at a poker table named Tommy, no last name she'll give me, which tells you everything you need to know about Tommy, who lent her $30,000 at terms that weren't written down and didn't need to be. 4 months. That's what Tommy gave her. Pay it back or face the kind of consequences that don't show up in a credit report. She didn't tell me. Not one word in 4 years. Not when Dad died. Not when Mom died. Not when I was 2 weeks from closing on a house and she was running out of time. Drove to her apartment in Dayton the same day she called. Sat across from her at her kitchen table with a notepad. Asked her to walk me through all of it from the beginning. She found an attorney named Randy Polk out of a strip mall on the east side. Guy had a hand-painted sign and shared a parking lot with a nail salon. She told him she had power of attorney over the estate, a flat-out lie. She showed him a document she made herself, printed at Office Depot, signed in my name. He either didn't check or didn't care. He processed the sale. She signed my name on the deed. Used an online notary service that stamped it remotely. Never saw either of us in person. Never verified a thing. The title company pushed it through in under 2 weeks. Cash deal. Quick close. Nobody pumped the brakes. The buyer was a man named Dale Pruitt out of Columbus. $187,000 in cash, below what the place was worth. But Pruitt wasn't complaining, and Lauren wasn't in a position to negotiate. She paid Tommy. She paid Polk. She had about $20,000 left. I asked her where the $20,000 was. Gone. She said she went back. She thought she could fix it. I didn't say anything to that. There's nothing useful to say to that. I wrote down Randy Polk's name. Dale Pruitt. The notary service. The title company. The timeline. Everything she'd told me, organized into a list. She asked me what I was going to do. I capped my pen. I told her, I'm going to get the house back. She started to argue. I told her, Lauren, I walk through buildings every day and find the things that are wrong with them. You think I can't find what's wrong with this? She stopped talking. Good. I left Lauren's apartment at 3:20 in the afternoon. 4 hours back to Cincinnati. I didn't call anyone. I just drove and worked the problem. Here's what I knew. 1. Under Ohio intestate law, Lauren and I were equal co-heirs of the Birchwood proper. Neither of us could sell, transfer, nor encumber that property without the other's consent. That is not a gray area. That is the law. 2. The deed transfer was void. Not voidable, void. There's a difference. Voidable means it can be challenged. Void means it has no legal effect at all, period. A forged signature conveys nothing. Lauren had no legal right to sell. Therefore she transferred nothing. Therefore Dale Pruitt owned nothing. 3. Pruitt's good faith buyer defense has limits in Ohio. A buyer cannot receive valid title from a seller who had no right to grant it. Doesn't matter how clean the transaction looked on paper. The title was no good at the source. 4. Multiple parties had legal exposure here. Lauren, deed fraud, and forgery, both felonies in Ohio. Randy Polk, the attorney who processed a transaction using a fabricated power of attorney. The online notary service violated Ohio notarization law. The title company potentially liable for pushing through a deal without proper due diligence. 5. And this is the one that changes everything. I know my own signature. I've signed inspection reports and official documents every single day for 11 years. And I knew Lauren hadn't actually seen me sign anything in a long time. She would have been working from memory or from something old. My signature changed when I broke my left hand in 2022 and had to adjust how I hold a pen. It's different enough that anyone looking carefully would see it, which meant the forged signature on that deed was already wrong. Not just morally, forensically. By the time I hit the city limits, I had a plan. Step 1. Get a real estate and probate attorney that week, not someday. Step 2. File for emergency probate administration and get myself named personal representative of the estate. Step 3. File a quiet title action. Step 4. File a police report with financial crimes. Step 5. Call Frank and Ruthie before they heard anything from Pruitt's people. Pulled into my driveway at 7:45 that evening. Made a sandwich. Sat at the kitchen table. Started writing emails. By 9 o'clock. I had a meeting scheduled with an attorney for Thursday morning. Her name was Linda Caruso. 23 years in real estate and probate law out of Dayton. A friend of a friend said she read every word of every document and didn't back down from anything. That sounded about right for what I needed. Linda Caruso read through everything I brought without saying much. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. She asked if I put it all together the same night Lauren told me. I told her. I had the drive home. She asked what I did for work, building inspector. I said. She nodded. Said that tracks. Said I think like someone trained to find structural defects. I told her that's exactly what this is. She agreed with my read. Void deed, not voidable. Strong fact pattern. The signature mismatch was going to be the sharpest piece of evidence. She wanted a forensic document examiner brought in right away. She filed 3 things that week. The emergency probate petition, naming me personal representative of the Harmon estate. The quiet title action in Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas to have the deed transfer declared void. And a motion for a temporary restraining order to stop Pruitt from taking any action against the property or the tenants while the case was pending. The TRO was granted the same day we filed. Pruitt couldn't serve Frank and Ruthie with eviction papers, couldn't start any renovation work, couldn't touch that house while the court sorted it out. I also filed a police report with Dayton PD financial crimes. Laid out the whole thing, the forged deed, the fake power of attorney, Randy Polk's name, the notary service, the timeline. Filed a complaint against Polk with the Ohio Supreme Court's Disciplinary Board. Filed against the title company with the State Licensing Board. And then I drove to Birchwood and knocked on the side door. Ruthie opened it. She saw me and her face did something complicated, relief and fear at the same time. Sat with Frank and Ruthie for almost 2 hours. Told them everything straight. What Lauren had done, what I was doing about it, what I believed the outcome was going to be. I didn't soft pedal it. They deserved the truth. Frank asked if I thought they were going to be okay. I told him, I think you're going to be fine. I'm not going to stop until it's settled. Frank Kowalski was not a man who said much. In 12 years, I think I'd heard him string more than 5 sentences together twice. But he looked at me across that room and said, "Your dad would have handled it the same way." Quiet and straight through. I drove home from that visit going about 10, over the limit the whole way. Needed to be moving before I sat still and felt it. Dale, Pruitt hired an attorney within 72 hours of being served. Guy named Garrett Wills out of Columbus. Reputation for being aggressive on real estate disputes. Filed 2 motions to vacate the restraining order in the first 3 weeks. Both got denied. Pruitt's argument was that he was a bona fide purchaser. Bought the property in good faith, paid cash, had no knowledge of any fraud. Therefore, his title should be protected. It's a real legal argument. In some states it might have had legs, not in Ohio. Not with a void deed. Linda laid it out plain. Wills knows the law. He's buying time. But there is no version of Ohio property law where a void deed becomes good because the buyer seems reasonable. I asked about Pruitt's $187,000. She said, his problem with Lauren. Not ours. He'd paid money to someone who had nothing to sell. He can sue her to get it back. I said she doesn't have it, she said. Still his problem. I almost felt bad for Pruitt. Almost. Then I remembered the 4 rent sign he put in Frank and Ruthie's window before the ink was dry on the deed. And the feeling passed. Randy Polk surrendered his law license before the disciplinary board could formally revoke it. He agreed to cooperate with the investigation. His cooperation produced a detailed statement. Everything Lauren had told him, every document she'd handed him. It all went into the record. The online notary service was fined by the state of Ohio. They put out a press statement about upgrading their identity verification procedures. I kept a copy. People ought to know these services exist and how they get used. Lauren was arrested on a Wednesday morning 6 weeks after she called me. 3 felony charges, deed fraud, forgery, theft. Bail set at $12,000. She didn't have it. She spent 3 nights in Montgomery County before a public defender got a bond arranged. I was at work when it happened, inspecting a new commercial build on the west side of Cincinnati. Found 2 code violations in the electrical panel that would have been somebody's problem down the road. Fixed things. That's the job. I filed an honest police report. I told the truth about what happened. What came after that was a consequence of what Lauren did, not what I did. I've had to remind myself of that. Here's the part I don't say much. About 2 months before all this went down, Lauren called me just to talk. Said she was having a rough stretch. I told her I was slammed and I'd call her back that weekend. I didn't call her back. I don't know if it would have changed anything. I tell myself probably not. But I'll never actually know. That's mine. The hearing was on a Thursday in late April. 8 weeks after Lauren's phone call. 8 weeks. That's how long it took from the worst Tuesday of my life to sitting in a courtroom watching Linda Caruso systematically dismantle Dale Pruitt's claim. The judge was the Honorable Patricia Marsh, 16 years on the bench. She had the look of someone who had heard every story and every variation and was going to hear this one the same way, completely, carefully, without being in a hurry. Linda started with the chain of title. 114 Birchwood, from 1991 forward. The purchase. My parents. The intestate succession. Equal heirship between me and Lauren. Methodical, like laying a foundation. Then she called the document examiner, Gary Whitfield. 27 years doing forensic document analysis. Testified in courts across Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. Calm, precise, not the kind of witness who gets rattled on cross. Gary walked through the comparison. 6 samples of my genuine signature from the past 3 years next to the signature on the deed. Then 6 samples from before my hand injury and 22-2 dot. The deed signature didn't match either set, but it was closer to the pre-injury samples. Whoever forged it had used something old. The way I formed the C at the start of Cole, the angle of the letters at the end, those were habits I had before 2022, not ones I have now. Gary's conclusion, stated plainly under oath in his professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, the signature on the deed transfer document was not produced by Cole Harmon. Pruitt's attorney cross-examined Gary for 35 minutes. Gary didn't move. When you've spent 27 years doing something and you know you're right, you just don't move. Then Linda put in my work records. Inspection reports time-stamped on the day of the closing. I was in Cincinnati. Email logs from the company server. I was never in Dayton. Never at any closing. I signed nothing. Judge Marsh asked Pruitt's attorney one question. Did the title company perform any in-person verification of the seller's identity at any point during this transaction? The answer was no. They had relied entirely on electronically submitted documents. Judge Marsh wrote something down. Moved on. I've been reading rooms long enough to know what that pause meant. The ruling came from the bench. She didn't make us wait. The deed transfer from Lauren Harmon to Dale Pruitt was void as a matter of law. The property reverted to the estate of William. And Diane Harmon. Cole Harmon named personal representative for purposes of proper probate administration. Pruitt's recourse for the money he'd paid was a civil action against Lauren Harmon. The estate owed him nothing because the estate had never owed him anything. I drove straight from the courthouse to Birchwood, parked out front, sat in the truck for a minute, same spot I'd sat 8 weeks earlier when everything still felt like it was already over. The gray shutters were still up. That was going to take some time to fix. But the house was there, same as it had always been, solid. I knocked on the side door. Ruthie opened it before I could knock twice. She already knew I'd texted her from the parking garage. She stepped back and held the door open. "Come on in." Frank called from the living room. "Ruthie, is that Cole? Tell him I made pierogies. I hadn't laughed in 2 months." That ended right there. My closing on the Westwood house got pushed back 10 weeks. When my name showed up in court filings, even as the winning party, the lender flagged it, and Caruso had to write 2 letters and make 3 phone calls to clear it up. I closed on a Saturday morning in late August. My buddy Travis drove me there. He offered to bring balloons. I told him if he showed up with balloons, I'd drive myself. He did not bring balloons. I signed the final pages with my current signature, the one Lauren didn't know about, and the notary, who was sitting right there in front of me and had checked my ID twice, stamped the correct document. Travis and I sat on the back steps of the new house that evening with a cooler between us. No furniture yet, just the steps, the yard, the sound of the neighborhood settling into a Saturday night. He asked how it felt. I told him, good. Feels right. That was the whole conversation, which is exactly how it should have been. Lauren's criminal case moved slowly. It always does. Her public defender worked hard for her. In the end, Lauren guilty to 1 count of deed fraud. 2 years of community control, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, restitution requirements. No prison time as long as she complied. Last I heard she was complying. The court asked me for a victim impact statement. I wrote it myself. 3 drafts. Not because I couldn't find the words, because I kept finding too many of them and had to cut it back down. 3 paragraphs. I described what the house on Birchwood meant to our family. I described Frank's dialysis schedule and what displacement would have cost him. I described 9 years of saving and 2 weeks away, and then I wrote, I don't ask for a specific sentence. I ask that my sister get real treatment and real help. The Lauren I know is worth saving, but she's the only one who can do that work. Nobody can do it for her. I read it in court. Lauren sat 8 feet away and looked at the table in front of her the whole time. In the hallway after, she tried to talk to me. I said, not yet, and I walked to the elevator. That wasn't coldness. That was honesty. I'm not there yet. Pruitt filed a civil suit against Lauren to get his $187,000 back. There's nothing in Lauren's name worth collecting on. It's not my problem. The Birchwood estate is in formal probate now. I'm the personal representative. When it's done, it gets split equally between me and Lauren per Ohio law. I'm not cutting her out. That's not who I am. And it's not what my parents would have wanted. Frank had a decent stretch this year. His kidney function stabilized enough that his nephrologist let him cut back to 2 dialysis sessions a week. Ruthie says he's been better than he's been in a while. She thinks having a sure footing under them made a difference, knowing they weren't going to get a notice on the door. I think that's exactly right. My dad bought that house with his uncle's inheritance money and the kind of stubborn patience that working men develop when they understand that nothing good comes without waiting for it. My mom stood in the empty living room when they got the keys and didn't say anything for a while. That was enough. They raised 2 kids in that house and rented the bottom half to a couple who needed somewhere solid, and gave them that for 12 years without ever once making them feel like a transaction. They didn't think of any of that as remarkable. It was just what you do. I drive over most Sundays now. Check on the property, old habits, occupational hazard. Sit with Frank and Ruthie for a while. Sometimes I go upstairs into the old apartment and stand in my mom's kitchen where the rooster wallpaper is still on the walls because I haven't gotten around to changing it. And I think about what it means to hold on to something. People ask me if I feel like I won. I tell them I don't think about it that way. I think about it like this. Some things are worth the work. Some things are worth the fight. And some people will look at you and figure you're not going to do anything about it. They're usually wrong about that. My dad taught me that. Not in a speech. Just by doing it in front of me until I understood. Lauren calls me sometimes. I pick up when I'm ready. We're not okay right now. We're still family. Those 2 things can be true at the same time, and you don't have to. Resolve it today. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I held on to everything that was. That's just what you do. If Cole's story landed somewhere real for you, it was supposed to. These aren't just stories about betrayal. They're about what happens when somebody decides they're not going to let it stand. When they get quiet, get smart, and get to work. Subscribe to Whispered Tales. Leave a comment. Tell us what part of this one hit you. Was it the drive home? The courtroom? Frank and his pierogies? Share this with somebody who needs to hear it. Somebody who's sitting in their truck outside a house that should still be theirs. We'll be right here. The stories they didn't expect anyone to tell. We're telling them anyway. Whispered Tales, the stories they didn't expect anyone to tell. If this shocked you, like, share, and hit the subscribe button. This story was brought to you by the Whispered Tales.